Hello, guys. I am Mr. Silk, and today I have a very honored guest with me today, and his name is Erik Carlberg, also known as 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐧. He's one of Mystery's closest wingmen, and today we're going to talk about something really important, something fundamental that I believe is fundamental when it comes to attracting and dating women. So, what is emotional connection exactly? Well, we can start here. According to the leading psychologists out there, according to the psychological community and also the community in behavioral science, what they have seen is that in order to be able to start with relationship building with women, we as men have to establish a certain amount of safety and trust first before she can be ready to start taking in other elements that is very necessary for relationship building. And what happens during the relationship building? Well, attraction spikes happening if the phase of relationship building is made in the right way. So me and Erik, we have been in different podcasts together with other leading dating coaches, and we do have a common ground, something that I found almost immediately, and that was about the importance of having an emotional connection first. So, Erik, before we start, please tell me a little bit about yourself for my audience.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Or should I call you Mr. Silk? Mr. Silk or Michael?
Go with Mr. Silk.
Mr. Silk. Okay, let's see if I can remember. As I'm normally casually off the camera, I refer to you as Michael, but Mr. Silk, thank you very much for having me. Yes, my name is Erik Carlberg, dating coach for men.com. I have been a professional coach now for 15 years. I knew that I wanted to be a coach starting 19 years ago. But I started coaching officially about 15 years ago, part-time. It's slowly spiraled into my full-time job. I recently completed a 250,000 word book on the dating game that'll be released in a few months called The Vortex of Love. I've been a coach with Mystery for about 9 years now. I'm actually Mystery's US sponsor and agent. I'm proud to call him a good friend of mine. So I partner up with Mystery. I do my own coaching, looking to partner up with other great coaches such as yourself, Mr. Silk. Maybe we can create something together in the future. And yeah, I enjoy jumping on these podcasts, sharing my thoughts and experiences. And thank you very much for having me. That's the basics of me.
It's great to have you, Erik. Really, it
Yeah.
is. So let's get straight into it. When we talk about emotional connection first, in order to be able to start relationship building, it actually differs quite a lot from the original Venusian art model, the M3 model that the Mystery actually created. So I'm very curious, what actually changed your mind throughout, all these years, all your experience? What was the thing that made you realize that, oh, I need to create some connection with the women first before I start with relationship building stuff, such as the attraction phase and so on? Tell me more about that part. What made you change?
Mm. Yeah, so what I think is what I came to realize was, that first of all, I think that the M3 model is really incredible and it has its place. And I think that every guy should learn the M3 model and understand its nuances. But what I think is more accurate is that there are multiple things going on at once. So, I do believe that we can trigger attraction in a woman somewhat quickly if we do it properly, but it must also be done in conjunction with some sort of baseline of feeling safety and trust. So in my model, for example, I call this element two. And I split element two into social element two and romantic element two. Social element two means, do I want to even be friends with this person? If there was no romantic connection at all, if there was no attraction whatsoever, is this the kind of person that I would even want in my life as a friend? And when first meeting somebody, we don't really know much about them, but we tend to pay attention to how somebody makes us feel. We do this either consciously or subconsciously. So if a man steps up to a woman and he's running some great attraction based material, but the woman gets an underlying feeling of distrust or uneasiness around this guy, it's likely not going to work. If anything, it could actually cause attraction to invert. She could actually become negatively attracted to a guy and feel a sense of wanting to push him away. So I do believe that, you know, we can sort of start with attraction building if we want to, but if we do start with attraction building, we have to sort of lace in this element two uh, aspect as well. She needs to feel on a gut level safe and like we're not a danger and a threat, you know. And I would say that on a more macro sense, more drawn out sense, you know, attraction doesn't develop so quickly in women as it does for men. You know, men are very visual. Attraction can hit very instantaneously. This is something that I've observed from my own experience, but you actually have some scientific research to support that as well. So I'll leave you to discuss the science, because that's something that I've simply observed myself, and I know a little bit about the science, but that's more your wheelhouse. So that's kind of a good starting point for my thoughts on that.
Yeah, so one great point you made there is that it's much more about how she feels when she's with you than what she feels when she sees you, without knowing how it feels to be with you. So that is like two huge different parts. Um, so if we want to look at the science into it, that also might contradict the M3 model a bit. And that is that according to behavioral science and interpersonal communication theory, in order to be interesting, you have to be interested towards the other person. You have to be curious about the other person. Because what we have seen in the scientific research is that when people, and especially women, when they are talking about themselves and what they think about things in depth, that is when they feel at best in conversations, at best. And when we made a lot of neural imaging, measuring neurotransmitters that actually are connected with the feeling of attraction, the feeling of sexual attraction, falling in love, bonding, and all that. What we have seen is that the only thing that really spikes those neurotransmitters in women's brain is when they are talking to someone that truly listening, that truly listen. Mm. Then they also, compared that research, that part, with women that were listening and were seeing interesting things. Maybe a guy who were a great storyteller, or someone who performed something really well that was really entertaining and amusing, like a comedian, for example. When they checked the neurotransmitter release in that situation, it was not even close to the one when she was speaking about herself, when she wanted to explain what she think about things to someone who were listening. So that actually takes the part from the M3 model, because the M3 model in the beginning is so much focused on you telling your DHV stories, you telling you performing your routines, and you trying to get to the next stage by spiking the buying temperature, like the way she feels in terms of entertainment. So I'm going to leave that to you, but have you noticed, because that's also something we spoke about in our last podcast, that you know what, Michael, in order to really make it top notch, start to learn about the other person a little bit. See if she can be your friend. Be curious about her. Do that first. You see? And what I believe is that when you start doing that with women, that is when you saw something extraordinary happen. She was actually more hooked than ever before. And then now, when she was pretty much hooked because you were curious about her, you probably asked a couple of questions and you just vibe with her on the friendly basis. Now you can actually take the step much more efficiently. And that is probably something that you want to write about in your book, right? If I got you wrong.
Yeah, no, these are definitely topics that I talk about in my book. let me start by saying this. I think that everybody should develop a style of game, if you will. And I don't use the term game in a derogatory sense. I just mean a guy's ability to attract the women that he's interested in, his ability to have romantic options. So I believe every guy should develop a style of game that feels right for him, that feels sustainable for him. Some guys are more talkative. Some guys like to talk more. Some guys are more stoic and they're better listeners. But if we're going to generalize and if we're going to ask ourselves what works best, I believe that a guy needs to be able to do both. I believe that most women, especially most kind of healthy, balanced women, they want conversation to be a two-way street. If the guy is a really good listener, but she gets this sense that he's just trying to open her up and get her to talk about herself and not revealing anything about himself, like he's just doing that as almost a power move, that could cause her to lose trust. You know, she's going to feel at some point like, I'm sharing a lot about myself. This is great, but I want to know about him too. So if I'm going to generalize, I think that most women want a nice back and forth two-way street, right? But the M3 model was developed, you know, to be used primarily in like nightclub and nighttime venues, right? Places where there are chat zones, not necessarily clubs, because sometimes clubs are just so loud that you can't even talk. And a lot of mysteries teachings are based on our ability to have a conversation with the woman. So much of the M3 model is developed to deal with sort of the logistics of these environments where there's a lot of chaos going on. There are people vying for everyone's attention. So, you know, mystery has a tendency to open conversations and run lots of material very proactively because he's trying to sort of command attention and, you know, get eyes on him so he can perform his sleight of hand. He's a very talented illusionist. He can
Mm.
vanish rings and he can make cigarettes disappear and he can make straws jump out of drinks. So he tends to run a lot of material. He does this for a variety of reasons. He doesn't want the woman of interest to hijack the thread and take it in a disadvantageous direction. So it's very he's very proactive in conversing, but ultimately we do want to get to a point where the woman is opening up to us as well. Um, and I think that sometimes when we open a conversation, if we start by asking questions, the woman may open up. She may be available. She may be attracted to us enough to start opening up. But sometimes we do have to lead with sharing about ourselves first. Sometimes when we share about ourselves, we're in the mindset of giving and opening up. She will feel more comfortable opening up and giving as well. So I think it's what I try to do anyway. When I interact with a woman, my goal is definitely to get her to open up because you're 100% right. If I just do all the talking and she never opens up about herself, she's less likely to have that emotional connection spark and attraction spark, you know. So when I interact with a woman, I will either open up first and see how she responds. Does she start opening up to me? Or I will try to get her to open up first. If she doesn't open up, when I try to get her to open up, that's when I'll start opening up. I'll do this little back and forth jujitsu where I'm sharing of myself, trying to get her to share. Oh, she's not sharing yet? Okay, I'll share a little bit more about myself, see if she's ready. And little by little, I sort of pry that lid open because the ultimate place I want to get to is where she is opening up and she's sharing with me. I'm also sharing with her. So there was quite a bit of nuance packed in there, but I think I touched on most of the points I wanted to make.
Okay, so guys, you guys that have followed my course, that follow my videos for some time, actually Erik nailed it pretty good, didn't he? Okay, so Erik, this is what we used to call the collaborative communication tactic. So that is to make the conversation two ways, to make the conversation dynamic. So for example, like a really good conversationalist will probably speak about 40% of the time, but when he speaks, it almost sounds like it's him and her talking about her. But when it comes to sharing something about yourself, and that is so important to share something, sharing is it has its place, and it's very, very important to create that connection as well. It should, however, be pretty short and concise, but you need to share something about yourself. And I'm going to give you an example. So, for example, if I just come to meet you in the street, let's say you're a woman, for example, and I say, hi, I saw you. I just wanted to say hi. I'm Michael. What is your name? And you probably, let's say you say Vanessa. Oh, my name is Vanessa. And then I can ask a close-ended question by saying, oh, Vanessa, are you from here? She will either say yes or no. Let's say she say yes. Now, in order to make the conversation engaging, I want to share something about myself. So what I do here is, okay, okay, I've been here for 3 days now, and I love the city. I mean, I just love the ocean. I love the beach, and I just love the weather and the atmosphere of the place. The people are really nice here. And then now I share a little bit about what I thought about the place we are in. And then I ask a follow-up question. So I'm curious, what do you think about living here? And then I'm quiet. That is what you actually told us. That is like this, creating this dynamic situation, dynamic conversation. The same goes with like if I ask a woman like, what do you think about this place? And she will look at me, look away, think a little bit, and she will say like, oh, I think it's beautiful. All right. If I would ask her directly many times about what she mean with beautiful, for example, that can sometimes, I mean, if she's like to speak a lot and she's very talkative, she will just go straight into it and explain what she thinks is beautiful. But other times, women are not really ready yet to open up so much. So what you can say is, you know what, I think it's beautiful too, because I mean, just look at the architecture. I just love those historical buildings. That's like my thing. I'm curious, when you say beautiful, help me to understand that better. Or what do you actually mean? And then you're quiet. Now she's ready to explain her version of what she thinks is beautiful with that place she's in, because you shared first. So it's almost like you're giving her a green go to feel comfortable of sharing you what you think about things, because in the beginning she doesn't know you much at all. So since you shared in the beginning, she's very happy to share back. It's almost like, I want to say reciprocate, but yeah, it's sort of like reciprocation. It's like she wants to give her side of the story because you gave your story first. Is that what you meant as well? Is that a little bit like this back and forth? Was it
Yeah,
style you
yeah.
thought about? Yeah.
You know, what this ties into is this concept that I call 6 degrees of conversational separation. So, if you've ever heard of the concept of 6 degrees of separation or 6 degrees of from Kevin Bacon, it basically means that everybody knows everybody through 6 mutual connections. We're all somehow connected. Well, what I've found is that if you take 6 random topics and you throw them out there to a stranger, you're going to have something in common with just about everybody in the world. So I call it 6 degrees of conversational separation. And what I like about what you said is you'll say something like, I really like the architecture here. Well, maybe her brother is an architect. Maybe she's an architect, or maybe there's something about, shopping a store that you just went into. Oh, I just went into this store and I got this new shirt or whatever, and she works at that store or something. 6 degrees of conversational separation means if you throw a smattering of topics out there to somebody, something is eventually going to stick. So what you're doing is you're attempting to share things about yourself, get her to share things about herself, and ideally within a couple topics being thrown out there, something is going to connect. Now you have a connection. Now you can build on that connection. You don't want to stick to that. You don't want to stick. We call that milking the opener, right? You don't want to find a commonality and then just cling to it for dear life. You want to branch off. But at least when you find that first commonality, now you have your foot in the door. Now you've bought yourself 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, and so forth. So I feel what you're talking about is closely related to this topic. I just looking at it from a technical sense.
You know what that tactic is called in the scientific world? That
Mm.
is like, okay, this is scientific theory made into practical methods. Basically, we call it free association method.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so every keyword, I like to call them keywords. Some people call them cues. Some people call them threads. I like keywords. So when she said a keyword, or I let's say the architecture became a keyword. what is the free association based on that keyword that has a relationship with her? It will come out eventually. Either if it's architecture, if it's the beach, if it's like the work being a nurse or whatever, of course that we can always connect those things with related topics in the relationship with the one you're talking to. So it's basically a free association technique, which actually become it creates an atmosphere of empathy, because it's sort of like you're trying to understand the underlying reason of things. So let's get back to emotional connection and empathy, for example. What I've seen create emotional connection is basically not only finding out information about someone, it's actually to get down in depth and find out the empathy, the empathetic part of someone. I mean, many times we are doing things, we are liking things, but we never ask about the underlying reason of why. So, for example, if I ask you, what do you think about the city you are in? What do you think about Austin, Texas, for example? And you're telling me that, oh, you really like it. You like the people, you like the activities around the city, and it's just beautiful. Now you're leaving me so many cues to take from. I mean, I don't understand what you mean with beautiful. What does that mean? Maybe I think it's beautiful too, but it's probably a different perspective that we have. A lot of nice activities. I probably also think it's a lot of nice activities to do in Austin, Texas, but I don't know your activities. I just don't know about them. So, an atmosphere, what does that even mean? So, if you're skillful to really listen to all those keywords, and then now you like want to pause a little bit and then hold on, when you say that you just love the atmosphere, what do you mean exactly? Tell me more. I'm curious. If I want to share something before I ask that question, I can say, you know what? I've been to Austin, Texas once, and the atmosphere was a little bit of a mixed feeling. I loved the Chinatown, for example. I love the Asian food over there, the Asian district. But the atmosphere in the business center was not really my thing. But I'm curious, when you say that you love atmosphere, help me to understand that better. Tell me more about it. You see what I mean? So we actually getting into that empathetic area to really establish a real emotional connection. So I can figure out like what is the underlying reason of things. So out of curiosity, how much of that have you put in your book and learned all those years? The empathy part.
Yeah. So empathy is another one that ties into it ties into element two. It also ties into element three. There's a bunch of stuff here that I could tie into some of the concepts that I've developed. There's also element three, which has to do with the physical bond, but it also has to do with how comfortable somebody is in our space. You know, how comfortable are we with somebody in our personal space? So when you're having this interaction with the woman, you know, getting inside of her psychology and learning more about her is important because, as you said, it's giving you information about the way her mind operates, right? And you can almost sense her on a deep gut level, on a visceral level, right? The deeper you go with this stuff, and the way that you learn how she responds to different keywords. And what this does is it builds element two. It builds basic social trust, okay? Because the quality of your questions are just as important as what you say. You tell stories about yourself, great, that's fine. But when you ask good questions, you're getting her to reveal information about herself, but she's also learning a lot about you through the quality of these questions. Okay, he's actually digging deeper. These are interesting, unique questions that I don't typically hear a guy ask, you know? So this is good for building element two. It's good for building attraction because you're separating yourself from the typical guy. It's good for element three, assuming you have good body language and good awareness as you interact with her. And also, you're drawing the conversation out for a longer period of time, which gets into exposure theory, which I'm sure you know a little bit about this. This is the idea that the
Yeah,
more
I
time
know.
we spend with somebody, the more we become like them and the more likely we are to trigger attraction. This is why people can develop relationships in school or in the workplace because they're around one another for a long period of time. So not only is getting to the root of her psychology and getting to her to open up about deeper things going to build element two, build element one, build element three, make her feel even more emotionally connected to you, but you're also expanding the timeline of being with her, which is going to, by default, make her feel safer and more comfortable with you. Because at first you're a stranger, and then through good conversation, she finds herself 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes down the line, still there with you. And this backward rationalization mechanism can start to kick in where she says, I'm enjoying this conversation. I think I'm attracted to this guy. I feel pretty comfortable with him. So everything that you're saying, I think is very spot on.
Yeah, really. And what you're saying is spot on as well, Erik. Absolutely. And we call that the similarity effect.
Mm.
Similarity effect. That is what we call it in behavioral science. So
Mm-hmm,
we're
mm-hmm.
creating, the feeling of similarity, and it gives the statement, the quote that comes from the psychological community, and that is like, we tend to like people that are like us. We tend to love
Yeah.
people that are like us. You see, so that is also very important. One of the pillars to actually create a solid bonding with someone. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that all is also part of emotional connection. Really, part of.
Indeed. Indeed.
Yeah, and also I just love the way you say that with that with that process of learning to know about her, to gravitate towards similarities, to gravitate towards common interest, then she just feel great in that conversation. And that
Mm.
is when she start feeling like, wow, this guy is a cool guy. I feel attracted towards him. I feel drawn towards him because I feel great being with him. And that is something that so many guys and maybe dating coaches as well are missing out. You see, it's not all the way all about being cool and flirtatious, and the more sexual you are, the more successful you are. That I have never seen anything like that as a rule. Emotional connection takes time, and attraction takes time to build up. It's not
Mm-hmm.
something that you just perform, you just perform in a certain way and suddenly you feel attraction based on a certain performance. It's much more about understanding,
Mm.
understanding
Yeah,
and the
I have
willingness of learn. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I have this concept in my book. I break attraction up in a few different ways, but there's this thing called level one attraction. And level one attraction is when somebody feels almost an instantaneous gut level attraction towards somebody. We experience this often as men when we see a really attractive woman. We see attractive woman and boom, attraction hits us really fast, like a lightning bolt chemical reaction. I call this level one attraction. Women can experience level one attraction as well, but women have often experienced being attracted to a guy very quickly, only to be turned off by him sometimes within seconds. Boom, there's a really good looking guy. And then he says or does something really crazy or weird with his buddies, and she goes, oof. And she's instantly not attracted to him. So if if we can trigger level one attraction in a woman with our looks, with the way that we dress, with our body language, with our voice tonality, with um, a powerful opener or something, if we can trigger level one attraction, instant attraction in the woman, great, bonus, okay? But it often does not happen that way. And we need to continue the interaction anyway until that attraction builds up and crosses this threshold I call the attraction threshold.
Mm.
So when we can get level one attraction, great. Most of the time, we're not going to get it. And here's the other kicker. Even when we do get level one attraction, even when the woman is instantly attracted to us, she's often not going to reveal it because she's so used to guys doing that. She's used to guys being instantly attracted. Oh, he wants me. He wants me. He wants me. She can see it on their face instantly. So women sometimes do feel level one attraction, but when they do, they usually don't show it anyway. So for a variety of reasons, it's better not to worry about that regardless. It's better to have a more holistic game plan for stimulating attraction, building trust, triggering that emotional component as you've alluded to.
Wow, it makes a lot of sense. And one of the biggest misconception I feel people have, guys have, when it comes to women, is that they think they actually created that instant attraction spikes in women. But the truth is more of an indicator of interest for her to learn more about the guy. And then she
Mm.
just found out that it's not for me, and she get turned off immediately. So that is what I'm telling guys. Like, even though you see like, a stud having great wearing and looking great, going up and make some, flirtatious comments to a woman and all that. For guys that don't have so much experience, they're going to look at them from distance. This looks great. She looks really interested, almost the same way as that guy is interested in beautiful women. But I never seen any women basically um, willing to go all the way. It's more like an indicator of interest, really. So let's say this one: in order to a woman to sleep for you, for example, the emotional connection have to be there, but the holistic attraction have to be there. And you being good looking, you being a stud, you being, just the way of your moves and the way you talk to her looks like you can spike a lot of attraction. It might not be so much of this holistic attraction that she needs in order to be able to relationship build with you. It might
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
be this dopamine kick, as we saw from the scientific research. When women saw beautiful men in a specific scientific research setting, they just saw that women have a small spike of dopamine, meaning that it was like an indicator of she want to learn something more about the man. But when they
Yeah.
tried to check the men's brain activity, when they saw beautiful women, they got all those neurotransmitters spikes in the brain: dopamine, epinephrine, oxytocin, serotonin, all those love neurotransmitters and hormones came up in the brain just like that. So the guys were just in love. We cannot replicate that feeling with women. The scientific community have tried that a lot. They can't. But when they talk in depth about themselves and what they think about things to someone who's active listening, it's different between active listening and passive listening. An active listener is a guy who is good in this ninjutsu style, as you call it. He's good at sharing back and forth. That's an active listener. And when she is actually talking about what she think about things in depth and about herself, that is when all those neurotransmitters that's linked to attraction, sexual attraction, falling in love, and all that men have when they see beautiful women, happen in women when they were talking. You see, and that is also something that you experience, and that is why it's so interesting to talk with you, Erik, because you have a long experience about dating and attracting women. And what you have seen now, based on your field report, is that something is happening when you're coming to that depth, when you're having that kind of introduction of creating this emotional connection, and then the attraction just comes from there. Didn't you find that this is something amazing, actually, something revolutionary?
Yeah, so it's definitely every woman has sort of an ideal in her mind of what she's looking for. And she also has an ideal of the way that the courtship process goes down. The more closely we match her ideal in both who we are and also the way that the process goes down, the more she will consciously or subconsciously be drawn to us. And some women have a flexible ideal. Some women have no ideal. They're kind of open to whatever. But that is in and of itself an ideal as well. So every woman has sort of an ideal amount of attraction that she wants to feel for a guy in order to pursue something more. I call this the attraction threshold. Basically, if you picture an X and Y axis, on one axis you have physical attraction, on the other axis you have personality-based attraction. If she feels a sufficient level of physical attraction and personality-based attraction, you will cross what's called her attraction threshold. Some women have flexible attraction thresholds, meaning if you're really good looking, she might cut you some slack in the personality department. More often, if you have a really good personality, she may cut you some slack in the physical department. Some women have very rigid attraction thresholds, but just because we cross her attraction threshold doesn't mean it's at the level necessary, as you said, for relationship building. So crossing her attraction threshold is just something that happens in her mind. Level one attraction, as I've alluded to, is if we can get some sort of instant attraction, which often doesn't happen. Level two attraction is where we have established a baseline connection with her and she's open to pursuing that further. That means she's either open to going on an instant date, she's open to getting to know us on a deeper level right then and there, or she's open to exchanging contact information and continuing the interaction at a later date and time. This is called level two attraction. Once again, that does not mean that attraction is at its fullest capacity. What level of attraction she needs to feel in order to sleep with a guy, for example, is dependent on each woman. And it depends also on how much trust has been established, how much element two, I call it, has been established. And then truly to get to the point where we can build a relationship with a woman where we have the potential to fall in love, for example, this is what I call bringing an element up to equilibrium. I borrowed this term from star formation. So when a star is forming, there comes a point where the energy being expelled from the star is balanced with the star's tendency to collapse back in on itself. And the star will actually burn at a steady rate. We call that equilibrium. So my goal when interacting with a woman is to build element one, attraction, to equilibrium. And once it's at equilibrium, now she not only feels attracted to me, she feels like there's sufficient enough attraction to where a relationship may ensue. She has the potential to fall in love with me. So you're absolutely right that oftentimes when we do get an initial spark of attraction from a woman, that doesn't mean she's completely sold.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you explained that very well. But haven't you noticed many times, and that is for you guys as well, that women, they just absolutely adore their boyfriends, might not have done so in the beginning. I met so many women that said that the guy became my type. My preference type was completely opposite. I didn't want to have anything to do with that type of guy. But then something changed during the interaction, during the conversation, during the emotional connection, during the whole relationship building. And what happened was that everything she sees with that man was the most beautiful thing. Even women that hate guys with a little bit of, like a tummy, like beer stomach, they hate that. But now they have a boyfriend, they have, like a beer stomach, and that is like the most cutest ever for them at this moment, because she in some way learned to she learned that he is her type now. He is her type. You see what I mean? I've seen that over and over again. So
Oh, yeah.
what I would say is, like, women think they have a preference, but they are pretty much blanked. It's more about how you look when you're interacting with her and how you make her feel. They're going to change how you look in her eyes with the process. But with that said, I'm not saying that look doesn't matter at all. We're not talking about the homeless dude on the street or something. We're talking about, being pretty average, can be like the most handsome, good looking guy for a particular woman if she now feel a strong emotional connection to the guy and attraction comes with it. Really, I've seen it over and over again. How about you, Erik? Have you seen
Oh,
that?
certainly. Yeah, certainly. And if you've ever seen the show Love is Blind, I strongly encourage people to watch all the seasons of that show. It's a great show to watch to just study dynamics and flirting. Excuse me, my voice is thrown out from Austin, Texas boot camp that I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
finished. So, but Love is Blind, they interview a lot of these people, and many of them say, if I met him in a bar, in a club, at a party or something, I probably wouldn't have given him a chance because he wasn't my type.
Mm,
But it's funny when they meet in these pods, because in the show Love is Blind, they're dating behind walls. They
mm,
can't see what the other person looks like, and they have to choose who they want to get married to. They can choose to say no later in the show, but they choose who they want to get married to based on interactions with no looks. You can't see what the other person looks like. And they develop serious connections. Sometimes when they meet in person, they are turned off, and physical attraction discrepancy is too great and it cannot be bridged. Okay. But some of them are turned off initially, and then a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, the tables turn and things are turned around, and they do develop attraction for that person. So I would say that I think women are a little bit better than men at this, because I think they develop a little bit younger. They understand relationships, and they understand at a younger age that looks isn't everything, sex is not everything. There's more to a relationship than just that. I think many men in today's day and age, especially if they're bombarded with pornography and lots of sexually suggestive material, they can feel a great scarcity of sex and options, and they tend to overemphasize physical attraction. But I think that once a guy gets a good amount of experience under his belt, and once he's had different experiences, I think that men can, in a similar fashion, do what women do, which is, you know, overlook certain physical imperfections. But I do believe that women are very good about that at a younger age. There's times where I've been with women that are very attractive, more attractive than me. I think that my fiance is more attractive than me, but I must make up for it in personality and in other ways, in some way. So 100%, if you've never experienced it, you likely will experience it someday, where you're dating somebody and you don't think you're that into them, and then something shifts, something changes. Sometimes your initial intuition is right. You think you're not into somebody and you're not into them a month later, 2 months later. If you're repeating that pattern, if you are constantly finding yourself drawn into situationships that you don't really want to be in because you're not really attracted to the other person, then you should cut the cord early, move on, put a little bit more of a higher standard on yourself, raise the bar. But if you're somebody who keeps cutting his losses and saying, this person's not attractive enough, that person is this, that, if you're finding all these things wrong, you would probably benefit from sticking a relationship out a little bit longer and seeing if things don't change down the road, because they can. They don't always, but they often do change.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's very important for guys to realize that as well. It's not like, you know, make it or break it in a short amount of time, because that's how they feel. It's like, she either like me right now or I'm lost. And there is nothing such thing that, oh, she must like me. And she look at me, and let's say that I go into a woman, and then she look at me like, oh, he's not my type. And now it's game over. That's it. No, that's not it. Absolutely not. A lot of women can feel like you are not their type, and you can easily become their type if you make them feel good in interactions. There's no question about it.
Oh, yeah.
That is based
I
on
don't
emotional connection. Yeah.
I don't fear the friend zone at all. I've had too many experiences where a woman didn't think she was attracted to me, treated me like a friend, treated me like she wasn't interested in me. She's focusing on my friends. I see her eyes on other guys and whatever. Erik's just a friend, right? Fine, put me in the friend zone. Let's see how that works out for you. And then over a period of time, over a period of a few days or a few weeks, or maybe even a few months, that friend zone crumbles away because the natural forces of attraction bubble to the top. But if I said to myself, as soon as I was friend zone, oh, that's it, I'm friend zone. She's up here, I'm down here. How am I going to get out of this friend zone? Well, then I probably will. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. But I never think that way. I just, and like you said, there's too much of a shit or get off the pot mentality in dating these days, where I'm going to walk up to a woman and I'm going to tell her I'm interested in her, and she needs to decide right then and there if she's interested in me. I'm going to compliment her. I'm going to smile. I'm going to put all this pressure on her. You're putting too much pressure on her to make a decision before she knows anything about you. Look, you can use direct game when you have to. If it's a daytime approach and she looks busy and you got to chase her down real quick and stop her, what are you going to do? Ask her about the weather? No, you should probably tell her why you chased her down and stopped her. But to put her on the spot and make her decide so quickly if she's into you, it just goes against common sense. It goes against my experience. It goes against the science that you've been discussing.
Mm.
Again, I'm not saying there's not a place for direct game. You can be direct, but as a default, as a general rule, trying to force attraction out so quickly is usually a recipe for getting it to just recede and crawl back into hiding.
You're absolutely right. And remember, guys, attraction has to be built up with time with women. It's nothing that just come directly. It might do actually for some women, but we're now talking about the rule, the main rule. We're not talking about the exception of the rule. So if we're going to talk about the default, as Erik mentioned, and the rule itself, attraction has to be built up with time through emotional connection. That is what science are saying. That is what I've experienced and learned. That's also what Erik has experienced during all his years of coaching thousands of guys, mystery method, also his own method, and together with probably you being approached lots of women as well. We have seen that, and it's nothing we can take lightly. I mean, the scientific evidence is very clear. The practical elements are very clear. So attraction has to be built up with time through emotional connection. And even though you might not be the one that you find super attractive in the beginning, you might not even be her type. Doesn't mean at all that you can't be her type over time. And when it comes to the friend zone, there's a big misconception there. Most of the time when people are talking about friend zone means that the woman doesn't want to be friends with them either. You see? So if a girl doesn't want to be friend with you and she put you in your friend zone because she just don't like your company, that doesn't mean that you are in the friend zone. But if you are, as the word are saying, you are her friend. You are her friend. She see you as her friend. There is nothing that I believe can change that into more of a romantic sense. Absolutely. Because it's more about you as a guy that have to show her and admit that you find her attractive in a way that means more than a friend. And if you're doing that in the right way, we're creating something called reciprocity in attraction. But many guys don't do that correctly. So they're just friends, and they never come into this real admittance or admitting that they find her attractive and that she's more than a friend based on real context. And because they never do, they just stay there in the real friend zone. Or like most guys, they stay in the friend zone where they're not even friends actually. Actually, they're just, guys that they don't want to spend with much. Do you agree, Erik? In some way?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
More of the acquaintance zone.
Yeah.
Acquaintance zone over the friend zone. And what you said about an emotional connection building over time is absolutely spot on. Element 4, I call it in my model, the vortex of love. Element 4 is an emotional bond, and it's the fourth element. And it usually comes about from the cycling of the first three elements. We cycle the first three elements over and over, and by default, the emotional bond grows. This emotional bond is essentially where she just starts to know how she feels about you. She no longer has to think how she's feeling. She feels it on a gut level. To take that a step further, I believe that one of the ways to getting it to grow over time is to pay attention to the emotional connection right from the get-go. Because like I said, people are consciously or subconsciously asking themselves how somebody makes them feel. We're not just listening to their words. We're not just thinking about them in rational ways. We are judging this stuff with our gut and our instincts as well. So I break down all of our tactics and techniques into three fundamental dimensions. One of those dimensions is intensity level, meaning when I say something or do something to a woman, do I want her to feel a large emotional impact? How large do I want her to feel that impact? Do I want her to feel a subconscious emotional impact that grows over time, that when it first happens, she doesn't quite register it? Intensity level is one of the key dimensions to our tactics and techniques. And because it directly affects element 4, the emotional bond, we can think of it as our E4, element 4 calibrator, if you will. So anytime we're saying and doing something to a woman, we are constantly gauging how is she responding to us emotionally, and we're calibrating to her comfort levels. We're not calibrating in a manipulative way to, manipulate her emotions. We're judging her emotional receptiveness, how she's receiving us on a gut level. And we're doing that throughout the entire courtship process until element 4, like all the other elements, reaches equilibrium. When all 4 elements reach equilibrium, we can fall in love. Those are what I believe to be the 4 fundamental elements for falling in love with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all stems from emotional connection for real. And also because when we talk about emotional connection, we're not only talking about what we think is emotional connection, and we're doing things that we believe create and build emotional connection. It's more about actually paying attention and validate that. Is that really so? How can I actually paraphrase it, summarize it? How can I actually pay attention and really see that that is? You see, it's almost like, as we say in the communication school, that it's not only about you understanding her in depth. It's equally as much value that you are communicating that you understood her to her. Just because you understood her doesn't mean that she feel like you understood her. That is why it's so important to use certain techniques and tactics to make sure that she understands that you understood her. You see what I mean? To create that. Because otherwise, if we are not active listeners, if we are passive listeners that just are quiet, we never share anything, we just quiet and listen to a person talking, that other person will not be sure in a subconscious level if you understood that person or if you really paid attention, even though you were just standing there and listen. That's why active listening is so important, to really make sure that the other person understood that you understands that person. And that same goes with the emotional feelings that she might have in that moment. Something extra important for her emotionally happened in the conversation about a certain topic. Can you pick up on that? You see what I mean? Can you relate on that? Can you even call it out? Like, you know what? It seems to me that you find that absolutely important for you. And then quiet, just to give the hint that I really understand you here. I think that is so important, and that is what I believe that you use in element 4. Like, you really pay attention to her feel and mood in certain areas of the conversation, a certain area of the interaction, to really see if you're really vibing her in the right level, or if there is something off there. Because most guys might not pay attention to that and just move forward without paying attention to the one they're talking to. Is that a little bit what you meant as well?
Yeah, I mean, a woman can tell when she's interacting with a guy who is tuned into her.
Yeah.
She's in a room and there's a bunch of different guys. One guy is completely in his own world. He's not paying attention to anybody's emotions. Another guy is paying attention to everybody's emotions to the extreme, to the point where he can't even express himself because he feels every pang of everybody else's moods, and he's too nervous. And then there's kind of this sweet spot in the middle where you are comfortable with your own emotions, you are comfortable with the sensations that are flowing through your own body, but you are obviously tuned into her emotions and what she's feeling. She can see it in your eyes, she can see it in your active listening, in the way that you say and you nod your head. There's times where you're feeling what she's feeling, you're vibing with her. So she gets the sensation that you're not just lining up with her psychology, but emotionally you can sense where she's at. This demonstrates social intelligence. It builds trust because she feels like this guy can sense where I'm at. He senses where my comfort levels are. So these are all vital things to demonstrate to a woman. In most cases, generally speaking, most women, by and large, the vast majority of them, very much appreciate a man who can sense where she's at emotionally.
Absolutely. One of the technique also from the communication school, one of the most powerful thing is to use labeling. I don't know if you heard about that empathetic tactic, labeling, is by when you listen to her and you find like, oh, she is in that state of emotion that you're talking about, you label it by saying, you seems to be very excited about that. You seems to be
Mhm.
very overwhelmed by that. That what you did there sounds like you are basically changing your life and so on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get the point. Yes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Anytime a woman's talking to me, I'm either just going to give her nonverbal feedback, head nods, and so forth, or I may just throw out choice words or relay back to her what she's saying. You know, sometimes I'll say, so if I'm understanding you correctly, and I'll repeat back to her in my own words what she's saying, or labeling, like you said, I'll just call it one thing, you know. Yeah, active listening, meeting her halfway. It's a
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great, man. So guys, this podcast today was about emotional connection, and me and Eric, we're going to do a series of different topics as well. Uh, but for this time, it was about emotional connection. And Eric, when you will release your book, please let us know. You're probably going to be finished in the later podcast we're going to have in the future. But for now, where
Yeah.
can they find you if they want to know more about you?
Yeah. So Erik Carlberg, datingcoachformen.com. About 4 months ago, 5 months ago, I just started some new social media accounts. So you can find me on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, a few other sites, but basically slowly building my subscriber base. I've largely stayed behind the scenes. I haven't put much out there on social media, but I'm starting to do that more and more. My book will hopefully be ready within the next month or two. It's called The Vortex of Love. Uh, and yeah, datingcoachformen.com is my website. Mr. Silk, very, very much appreciate being here with you, man. It's always a good discussion.
It was a pleasure to have you. And for now, guys, I see you in the next video.
Thank you.